markets are closed, but the business stories are just heating up. Hello, I'm Anne Asis-Carilo, sitting in for Robert Tan. Catch up with us on Business Brief. Asian shares were mixed on Tuesday as investors kept an eye on China-U.S. trade talks that might help stave off a recession. A second day of talks was planned after U.S. and Chinese officials met in London for negotiations over various issues, hoping that they can eventually reach an agreement to slash high tariffs against each other's. Japan's Nikkei 225 led regional gains, rising 0.87%. While Australia's ASX 200 advanced 0.67%. Both South Korea's Kospi and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index are flat, with the Kospi showing a slight upward bias. Meanwhile, the Shanghai Composite slipped 0.46%, and Singapore Straits Times Index dipped 0.11%. In the currency markets, the U.S. dollar traded mixed across Asia. It was flat against the Japanese yen and the Hong Kong dollar. The greenback slipped 0.11% versus the Australian dollar, but gained nearly 0.1% against the Singapore dollar. It also strengthened 0.69% against the Korean won and rose almost 0.1% versus the Thai baht. Gold, meanwhile, slipped 0.73%. In energy markets, West Texas Intermediate crude inched up nearly 0.1%. Brent crude rose 0.12%, while Dubai crude climbed 0.67%. In cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin gained 0.60%, and Ethereum jumped more than 3%. Send in the Marines. The Pentagon is deploying 700 Marines from Camp Pendleton to quell the protests against immigration raids in Los Angeles. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth asserts order needs to be restored. Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell also stated an additional 2,000 National Guard troops will also be mobilized as riots in America's second biggest city reach a stage. LA officials have pushed back against the deployment and are blaming the Trump administration's intervention for the chaos.
We didn't need the National Guard. Why on earth? What are they going to do? Do you know what the National Guard is doing now? They are guarding two buildings. They're guarding the federal building here in downtown, and they're guarding the federal building in Westwood. That's what they're doing. So they need Marines on top of it? I don't understand that. And it makes me feel like our city is actually a test case for what happens when the federal government moves in and takes the authority away from the state or away from local government. I don't think that our city should be used for an experiment to see what happens in the nation's second largest city. Well, maybe we can do this to other cities. I can't emphasize enough the level of fear and terror that is in Angelenos right now, not knowing if tomorrow or tonight it might be where they live, it might be their workplace. Should you send your kids to school? Should you go to work?
California's first Filipino-American Attorney General is taking U.S. President Trump to court over his deployment of National Guard troops to L.A. The state's Attorney General, Rob Bonta, calls the president's action unlawful.
This is a law that requires the governor's consent to activate the National Guard. This is the first time since 1965 that a president has activated the National Guard without a request from the state's governor. And the governor of California knows how to call in the National Guard if and when it's needed. He did it with the LA fires. He did it in the summer of 2020 with some of the protests in California. So this is something that is within Governor Newsom's sovereignty, and he did not authorize the use of the National Guard here, did not call for it.
The Quezon City-born Bonta, California's Attorney General since 2021, and other LA officials have said the protests had been peaceful until Trump got involved. But Trump isn't backing down and pins the blame on Governor Newsom instead.
We have an incompetent governor. So I talked about governors, but I didn't talk about, he's an incompetent governor. Look at the job he's doing in California. He's destroying one of our great states. And if I didn't get involved, if we didn't bring the Guard in, and we would bring more in if we needed it, because we have to make sure there's going to be law and order.
Texas Republican Representative Tony Gonzalez will reintroduce a legislation to increase penalties for assaulting police officers amid the recent protests in Los Angeles. The Curbing Offenses on Policing Services Act, which he previously introduced in 2023, aims to increase jail time and civil fines for assaulting law enforcement officers or interfering with the performance of their official duties. Gonzalez blasts what he calls a chaos unleashed by rioters in Los Angeles this week, as he refers to it as anarchy. Elon Musk is suddenly toning down after slamming President Trump last week. The billionaire has deleted his impeach Trump posts, refollowed top Trump aides, and echoed support for the administration's crackdown on LA protests. Wall Street eyes a fragile truce, even as Musk still knocks Trump's big, beautiful budget bill. Tesla rebounds to 4.6% on hopes of renewed political ties to protect business interests. U.S. President Donald Trump has no plans to discontinue Starlink at the White House, but may move his Tesla off-site. This is following his announcement over the weekend that his relationship with tech billionaire Elon Musk was over. Trump explains that Starlink does good service in providing high-speed broadband access. Last March, the president had bought a red Tesla Model S from Musk, but a White House official reveals that he might get rid of it after a public feud erupted between the two men. Hardline conservatives in the House of Representatives are making a broad swath of recommendations to make the one big beautiful bill of President Donald Trump's tax cut and spending priorities even more conservative. In a 10-page memo labeled to Senate Republicans from House conservatives, they suggest to put restrictions on the Medicaid federal medical assistance percentage that was expanded under Obamacare, scale back the increase to the state and local tax deduction, which the bill increases from $10,000 to $40,000 with a phase-out for income above $500,000. The hardline conservatives also pitches to increase a new 3.5% tax on remittances that migrants send to their home countries. President Donald Trump hosts a roundtable event to tout an initiative in Republicans' massive reconciliation package that will provide $1,000 for newborn babies to be put into an investment account. Trump calls the initiative as pro-family that will help millions of Americans to harness the strength of the U.S. economy to lift up the next generation. The so-called Trump accounts will put $1,000 in government money into an index fund tied to the stock market for newborns. The accounts will be managed by the child's legal guardians. Britain's ambassador to the U.S. is sounding the alarm on a proposed tax targeting foreign investors in the U.S. Peter Mandelson warns that Section 899 of Congress's big, beautiful pro-Trump bill could drive investors away. The envoy called it unfair, counterproductive, and bad for U.S. investment. In a sweeping shakeup, U.S. Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. removed all 17 experts from the vaccine advisory panel of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Critics say the move threatens trust in U.S. health policy. The ousted members of the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, or ACIP, mostly appointed in 2024 under former President Joe Biden, would have stayed through 2028. Kennedy insists that the move is about rebuilding public trust, not pushing a vaccine stance.
I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
We're taking a short break. The biggest business stories from around the country are up next. You're watching Business Brief. Back on Business Brief, new SEC Chief Francis Lim lays out bold agenda to fix capital market bottleneck. Our reporter Soo Jin Kim is in Makati City with the details.
In his first public appearance since taking office last week, Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Francis Lim shared his reform agenda to strengthen the Philippine capital markets. Lim's initial focus includes lowering regulatory fees, especially for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and simplifying SEC processes to encourage more companies to list on the stock exchange. He cited the burden of high filing costs and bureaucratic delays as reasons why many businesses avoid the formal capital market. To address this, the SEC, under his leadership, will prioritize speeding up the approval of pending applications, even if it means, he says, working overtime. The goal is to eliminate backlogs and signal to the market that the SEC is serious about improving access and efficiency. In addition to streamlining procedures, Lim is pushing for structural changes aimed at improving corporate governance, particularly among smaller listed firms. He believes market confidence can only be rebuilt if investors can rely on consistent compliance and accountability across all public companies. A key long-term initiative is to institutionalize financial literacy through formal education. The SEC plans to work with relevant agencies to include capital market and investment fundamentals in both high school and college curricula, with the goal of creating a more informed and active investor base. Lim is also reviving proposals to encourage state-owned enterprises and government-controlled corporations to consider public listing. The new chairman is strengthening ties with the judiciary as well, recognizing that legal clarity is crucial to investor protection. Lim will lead training programs for judges to better understand capital market cases and ensure consistent, well-informed decisions. He emphasized that many of the needed reforms already exist on paper. The challenge is implementation. To address this, he plans to form multi-sectoral task groups composed of the SEC, Philippine Stock Exchange, Philippine Dealing System, and private stakeholders to review rules, adapt international best practices, and recommend policy updates that are both effective and enforceable. Lim also called on the Capital Market Development Council, jointly led by the SEC and the Department of Finance, to take a more active role in addressing systemic challenges and removing policy roadblocks that hinder market growth. And those are latest updates from Makati City. Back to you.
Thank you for that report, Soo Jin Kim. British Columbia Investment Management Corporation signs an agreement to acquire a minority stake in Pinnacle Towers, a major telecommunications tower operator in the Philippines. Pinnacle Towers Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Patrick Tangney says that BCI investment marks an important milestone in their journey and a strong endorsement of their mission. Tangney explains that this will make the company well-positioned to continue to drive greater digital connectivity in the Philippines and across the region. Amazon plans to invest at least $20 billion to build out 2 data centers in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro says that the new data centers will be located in Salem Township alongside the Susquehanna Nuclear Power Plant and in Falls Township on the site of a former steel mill. The latest Amazon data centers come as tech companies race to develop artificial intelligence to compete with fellow U.S. firms and Chinese companies like DeepSeek. Huawei Technologies chips are 1 generation behind those of U.S. peers. That's according to its Chief Executive Officer, Ren Zhangfei. Zhangfei says that the firm is finding ways to improve performance through methods such as cluster computing. The chipmaker also invests $25.07 billion in research annually and sees promise in compound chips or chips made from multiple elements. The Bank of the Philippine Islands successfully lists its BPI Supporting Inclusion, Nature, and Growth Bonds, or SINAG bonds, in the aggregate principal amount of $40 billion on the Philippine Dealing and Exchange Corporation. In a press release, the BPI says that this represents a pivotal moment in the bank's sustainability journey and sets a new record as BPI's largest peso bond issuance to date. The SINAG bonds has 1.5-year tenor with interest rate of 5.85% paid quarterly. BPI also gives an assurance that the SINAG bonds are fully aligned with the ASEAN Sustainability Bond Standards. South Koreans remain the Philippines' top tourists' arrival. According to the numbers released by the Immigration Bureau, nationals from the land of the morning calm numbered north of 1.7 million in 2024. According to the Bureau of Immigration, South Koreans prefer the Philippines not only for its destinations, but also the thriving English language programs that the country offers. The Management Association of the Philippines added its voice on groups opposing the 200 peso legislated wage hike. MAP clarified that they fully support efforts to improve the living conditions of minimum wage workers. The proposed wage hike, recently approved by the lower house, will have potential impact on business costs and inflation. Filipino-Chinese business leaders, on the other hand, called on the bicameral conference committee of both the House and the Senate to conduct further consultations with affected sectors and industries. The lower house passed the bill to add 200 pesos on the minimum wage last June 3. Expect more changes in the future. That is what President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. promised, as he stated that performance review will be done quarterly as part of his plan to recalibrate performance and efficiency under his administration. The review will now include government undersecretaries in all government departments and agencies. The president also explained that there is no cabinet revamp since the review will be continuous and not a one-shot, one-time effort. The president ordered the courtesy resignation of all cabinet secretaries and heads of agencies last May 22 after the midterm poll elections.
We're still in the process of examining. Now, nasa baba na tayo. What happened really here was that I put everyone on notice that you are basically all on probation. And okay, this time, it looks like yung iba, magbuti naman, maganda naman ang performance. Ngayon, nasa USEC na tayo, nasa mga agencies na tayo. But we are, what essentially, what you refer to as a cabinet revamp, is not a one-shot, one-time, big-time thing. It is an ongoing thing. This is something, it is essentially putting all government agencies, departments on notice that we have to do better, and we will be looking very, very closely, and we will make that review on a periodic basis, maybe a quarterly basis.
President Bongbong Marcos says the impeachment trial will clearly cross over to the 20th Congress. In an ambush interview this morning, Marcos, however, added that all matters related to the issue are now up for the Senate to decide.
We leave it to them. It has moved already from the House. It has now been in the Senate for a few months. And we are watching, of course, what the Senate President Jesus Cordero is doing to try to make it as a peaceful a transition as possible from this Congress to the next. Because there's no way that even if they start the trials now, that they will finish it before the new senators come in. So, well, again, the senators will decide one.
Senate sidestepped Minority Leader Coco Pimentel's motion to fast-track VP Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. Instead, senators take their oaths as judges today, constituting the court, but clarifying that court is officially convened when House prosecutors present the charges on June 11. Senator Risa Hontiveros argued that the oath-taking should mark the court's opening and warned that changing definitions could undermine the process. Outside the Senate premises, protesters are calling for the impeachment court to immediately convene. They will hold a people's vigil at the Senate gate from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Vice President Sara Duterte flies to Malaysia for a family trip as the Senate moves to constitute her impeachment court. She is set to join consultations with overseas Filipino workers and Independence Day events on June 12. Senate President Francis Escudero has taken his oath as presiding officer, with other senators following suit later today. Over 200 House members backed Duterte's impeachment for graft, power abuse, and constitutional violations. In honor of this year's Independence Day, TBA Studios is bringing back their award-winning historical films, General Luna and Goyo ang Batang General. Originally released in 2015 and 2018, the films chronicle the stories of two famous Filipino generals during the Filipino-American War. Both won critical and commercial success for bringing Philippine history to life with gripping storytelling and powerful performances. The films will return to the big screen from June 12 to 15 in various cinemas. Philippine shares fall back to 63 or to the 6,300 level in the second trading day of the week. The PSE index ended lower by 0.9% to close at 63.47, finishing the day as the worst performer in Asia. All of the sectoral indices ended in the red, with financials falling the most at more than 1%. Decliners outpaced advancers 128 to 65. Total value turnover reached 9.4 billion pesos. Majority of the day's most active stocks ended in the red, with DigiPlus falling the most at nearly 6%. Meanwhile, at the foreign exchange market, the peso is currently trading at 55.74 against the greenback, strengthening from previous close of 55.81. That's a wrap for today's Business Brief. I'm Anne Asis-Carilo. Join us again tomorrow as we bring you the stories that help you plan your next big, bold moves in business. Only here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel. See you then.